Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Monorail Monday. This episode 5. We got 4 in the tank already for season 1. If you have missed any of those from the previous episodes, go back and check those out. They've been going up the last couple of Mondays. 6 episodes in season 1. We'll take a little bit of a break for a few weeks or a month or two. Come back with a second season with more exciting stories. So be sure to subscribe and keep up with what's going on with Monorail Monday. So let's go to the voiceover Lord for today's episode. Voiceover Lord.
Episode 5, Working at Disney and Universal.
Ah, yes. Ah, yes. So when I was working at Disney, I've been there a few years, and I decided at some point, I said, I need to make a little extra money. I wanted to get another job, work a few extra hours. What was I doing at the time? Working theme parks. I knew theme parks. That's something I could work flexible with my Disney job. I could get another theme park to sort of work around those hours. So I said, how about Universal? I'll jump over to Universal, work there at the same time. So when I started, when I was thinking of doing this, I was working nights at Walt Disney World. Working nights, working monorails. So I was planning on working days at Universal. So I just thought, okay, well, I'll just go and fill out an application and attend one of their open house interviews. And so I did that. A ton of people. They were actually holding the interviews. I believe it was at Dr. Phillips High School, which is across the street on the backside of Universal. And I just went there, fill out an application. Hey, I work at Disney. I'm looking to, pick up some hours during the day. And I had a quick interview. It didn't take long. They saw my background with Disney, and they said, so what are you looking to do? And I said, well, how about something in attractions? So pretty quickly, they said, you're in. We'd like to hire you starting next week. So it did not take very long for me to get hired. The interview process was just like that. Right away, she asked me what I wanted to work. And I said I was interested in attractions, something with attractions. And pretty quickly they said, how about Jaws? I said, great. I love the movie. I like the ride. I said, I could do this. I'd be great at working Jaws. It's in a way, it was similar to Jungle Cruise as far as the performance aspect of it, spieling on a boat, circling around, different group of passengers, a little bit different. Just there were fewer corny jokes and maybe a little bit more performance involved than Jungle Cruise. But I was totally on board with working over Jaws. So how it worked was I was brought in to do the overall Universal initial overview training that they have similar to Traditions. So the initial Universal training was the one day. Went over the policies, rules, when do you get paid, and that sort of thing, expectations. That was pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. Now things got a little bit different depending on the area you were assigned to. I was assigned to Jaws, so there were a couple of different things that had to go. One, it was a spieling attraction, so there was a certain theatrical element. You had to memorize the script, and you had to pass a sort of an acting test, an audition, to be able to be checked out as a skipper on that ride. The other aspect was because it was operating in water, they wanted us to be trained to be basically lifeguards to save people in the event the boat sank or people fell overboard. We were supposed to be trained to do safety things. So the very first thing I did after I did the general training, we had one Saturday, and I'm pretty sure we did it over at Dr. Phillips High School in their pool. And they had a big pool area, and we basically had to do swimming tests. We had to complete 2 laps in the pool. We had to do a whole bunch of life-saving techniques in the water using a board. And there were quite a few different aspects we had to do. A lot more endurance, practice things, going through CPR and things like that, how to do that on the water. So there was a whole lot of that it was basically 8 hours of pool or poolside training, water safety. How deep was it at Jaws? Not that deep. Generally, it was like 3 to 5 feet in a lot of places, maybe 6 feet in others. The boat was on a track, but it wasn't all that deep, except where the sharks were. Now, anytime you saw a shark, right in that location was a giant pit where all the mechanisms, the railing, the track that the shark would cruise by and then reset. Those pits were about 20 to 30 feet deep. They were quite deep. So when a shark needed to be fixed, they could raise the platform up from that pit. They had divers that could go down and take a look at it. But the rest of the ride was generally not all that deep. Most people could have stood up and been pretty close to the surface with their head. So anyway, we did that first day. It was all about water safety and basically a lifeguard CPR kind of stuff. Now, the next 2 days of training basically involved learning the script, learning the performance, the action, sort of jumping around. On Jaws, you were kind of leaping from one side with your grenade launcher in hand, looking, where's the shark? Where is it? And you had to perform, sort of sell what was going on. You jumping from side to side. And so you had to learn all that. We did a little bit of classroom learning where we sat there and just read over the script. Everybody read different parts of the script and sort of did basically a script read, like you see the folks on movies and TV do. And then the other aspect was we would go out on the boat and watch some of the skippers take us around. We had just a boat for us trainees, and we just watched them go around, and then maybe we'd throw and try and take our own shot at it. The second day was a little bit more classroom training, and that was immediately followed by just us going around repeatedly over and over, trading off. Maybe somebody would do 2 spins on the boat performing, and then somebody else would get a shot. The whole time you're looking at your script, you're watching, what is this person doing? It was pretty intense. I'm totally into the humor. I could throw myself into it. What's going on? Oh no, the shark's here. That was a lot of fun. But try and make sure that you had the script memorized and you're not trying to think too hard about what's the next line, responding to the radio calls, because they did have the audio piped in and you had to respond to the radio at the right time. So getting the timing down and memorizing the script, yeah, it took a little bit of work to get that just timed right. My recollection is that I checked out relatively quickly. I didn't need to go around too many times. I think most people that were in our training group, which was probably around a dozen or so people, most everybody passed. I think there was 1 or 2 people who either did not pass or decided that the spieling attraction was not for them and they wanted to do something else. Like we're Back to the Future or something like that, where there was you didn't involve any spieling. Confrontation, I believe, also was the other spieling attraction that Universal had at the time. So basically, I checked out. The next day, jumped out and started working at Jaws. And Jaws was a lot of fun. It was a little bit different. Throwing yourself around was exhausting, but a lot of fun. We'll go into more details about the operations of the attraction in Jaws at a later time. So basically what I was doing was I was coming and I was working mornings and early afternoons at Jaws, and then I was going over to Disney in the evenings to work monorails. So I might show up at Jaws 7 o'clock in the morning and basically do a basic cleanup, clean the boats, make sure the boats are all clean, ready to go. Clean the dock area, make sure everything's looking good, make sure all the queue is opened up for the morning startup when the guests arrived. And then we'd get on the boats, everybody would man a boat, and they'd start cycling the ride. And basically be looking to make sure that the boats are operating as they're supposed to. The spiel is working, the overhead audio, the automated audio is working. The audio, the PA in your microphone was working. Make sure the sharks were all working. and just sort of make sure things were going along. Yeah, you're just circling around in the morning, circling around. I used to sing songs as I go around, like a drunken lounge singer or something like that. Look at the shark! It was pretty fun circling around there just by yourself until guests arrived. And then if somebody would say over the PA, the park's open, we're going to start seeing guests at any time now. So then you just start into your daily routine. Now, jumping around on that boat was exhausting. It was tiring. An hour on that boat, circling around repeatedly, performing for the Jaws ride, it was pretty tiring. Especially when it was summer and you get the mid-90s. It was exhausting running around that boat, jumping back and forth, reacting to the shark. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Because I was working both jobs, both Disney and Universal, if things got a little slow and they said, hey, anybody want to take off early? We're looking for volunteers to go home early. Often I would take it because I say, I'm working another job. I don't necessarily need to stay as much as some of these folks might need the hours. And plus, I just got done working, say, 6 hours. I maybe was getting released 2 hours early. I got another 7 or 8 hours to go at Disney that night. Yeah, I'm okay leaving a little early, maybe grab a bite to eat. If I didn't leave early and I worked my full 8 hours, I would basically clock out at Universal, change out of my costume into my civilian clothing, race, stop at 7-Eleven for a big gulp because I was thirsty as all get out, and then race along to Disney, park at the transportation center, throw on my Disney costume, and race to whatever station I was working at that night. So I just race over there and jump into that, and then race home, and then be up at 5:30, 6 a.m. to race over to Universal again. So that's the kind of thing I was doing. 7 to 3, 7 to 4 at Jaws. And then say 4:30, 5 o'clock to 1:30, 2 a.m. at Disney. I was working a ton of hours. At the peak during the summer, I was doing 70, 80 hours between the two theme parks. Absolutely exhausting. A lot of fun, but very, very exhausting. But so I did it for 2 years. I did that, working both Disney and Universal, and it was really, really cool experience. The Disney guys, the Disney supervisors, did not ask me nearly that much about Universal. They knew I was working at Universal. They didn't mind. Nobody seemed to care or thought it was a problem. They weren't as curious as some of the Universal supervisors were of what's going on at Disney. Tell me what's going on. Now, when I was at Universal, I also ended up doing crowd control they had a Marvel stunt show at the time. It was kind of like Wolverine scaling a building and Spider-Man, and you had some of that stuff that you see over at Islands of Adventure. That was over at the main Universal park. There was no Islands of Adventure at the time. Now, while I was working at Universal, we did hear rumors. So we had a couple of guys and managers come through, and they were like, there's going to be another park in a few years. It's going to be called Islands of Adventure. And it was really cool to hear about this stuff long before it actually got announced, and talking about what they were working with. And it sounded really, really amazing. But back at this time, the early to mid 90s, Universal Studios did have it was sort of like just a street stunt show. There wasn't a proper stadium for it. It would just sort of happen on the street. They'd block off a section. You'd have these characters coming out and doing some stunts, and they would blast confetti at the end of it, and you'd sweep up a little bit, sweep the confetti up, and sort of clear the crowd up. So that's something I did a little bit. They would sometimes take volunteers or just say, hey, we need somebody to go. Bill, you're going to go do crowd control. So that's how I got my start at Universal. I worked both jobs for nearly 2 years, and then I finally resigned from Universal, and I just couldn't do both of them any longer. But it was a fascinating experience. It was really cool to do both of them, but it really was. very, very tiring because I was full-time at Disney and I was considered part-time at Universal, but I was working full-time hours at both places. I was basically working in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 hours at both places during that time. So next week is going to be the season 1 finale for Monorail Monday, episode 6. And we'll take a little break for a little bit, and we'll come back a few weeks, maybe a month or so later, with another season, more exciting episodes to come. So in next week's finale, we are going to cover training at Disney monorails. I'm going to tell you exactly what it was like to go through monorail training, what I did as a monorail trainer, tell you about my experience going through training as a pilot, as well as when I became a trainer and was training employee or cast members on operating, working the platform, and checking out as a driver. We're going to talk a bit about some of that in the big finale for season 1. Hopefully you enjoyed today's discussion about getting hired at Jaws and working both locations, both Jaws and Disney at the same time. If you have any questions, drop them below. Hopefully I can answer them either in the comments or we'll do a Q&A and answer some of your questions that you throw out there about further clarifying some of these things or just questions about how things worked. We'll answer those in the future. So most importantly, remember kids, have a good time all the time.